It's been a week now since the convicted Mother Emanuel AME shooter has been sentenced to death for the murders of 9 people of God at the church on June 17, 2015. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with the pastor of Mother Emanuel, Reverend Eric Manning. Reverend Manning.
Yes, Quintin.
Welcome to Charleston.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's finally good to meet you and interview you for Quintin's Close-Ups.
Very good. Well, thank you for having us. Appreciate
Anytime.
it.
Well, let me turn to the obvious. Judgment date. As you know, the convicted Mother Emanuel AME shooter was sentenced to death on January 10th.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people wanted that for him. Others wanted him life in prison. As we sit here right now, I'm wondering, what did you want?
Well, at the end of the day, the church never can endorse the death penalty.
Okay.
So it's very clear and concise from a church perspective. So that is realistically what we wanted. We did not want. We cannot endorse the death penalty. However, at the same token, we will acknowledge that we are under civil authority. So whatever justice looks like compared to the civil authority, that was what justice is. So from that particular perspective, we support the government in whatever decision they come up with.
The spiritual toll. You told Channel 4 this quote, "We've walked through it, and I understand the spiritual toll it has taken on the families, the church." What has the spiritual toll been like for the families and this church per se?
Well, the spiritual toll is you wrestle with the whole aspect. If you think about the death penalty, that's the easiest question, right? The flesh, as Paul talks about in Romans chapter 8, the flesh and the spirit, right? You struggle between the two.
Right.
The flesh says, I want a pound of flesh. I want the death penalty. The spirit says, no, every life is sacred unto God. So that's one particular example, very clear example of a struggle. The other aspect is, of course, you struggle with the sovereignty of God. Many people ask the same question, why would a loving God allow for this to happen? And at the end of the day, we really never understand the sovereignty of God. But once again, we come back to Romans chapter 8, and all things working together for the good. To them we love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. So somewhere along the lines, God continues to show himself gracious through the suffering that we have to continue to endure. The other aspect is, of course, one of the most prominent biblical examples is Job. Job, of course, lost everything, and yet he did not sin against God. When he comes to the tail end of the book of Job, right, he says, I have seen you before, I've heard of you before, but now I've seen you. There's a difference, and I think definitely Mother Emanuel members have heard of God through this. Now we have seen him, his glory and his grace bringing us through it. So in that context is what I was kind of referring to when I said that quote.
Yeah. Inside the courtroom, you said this also too, quote, "We no longer had to be back in the courthouse. We no longer had the anxiety of going through the prosecution. And we definitely didn't have to be in the presence of Dylan Roof," unquote. Walk me through more of that experience inside the courtroom.
Sure. Well, being in the presence of Dylan Roof, initially, as many of the families have shared, and myself included, initially was challenging. And as time progressed, yes, we became accustomed to seeing him in a courtroom, became accustomed to that surroundings. However, I think when we began to hear him speak, we heard no remorse, we heard all the other aspects. That, of course, took us to a different place as well. And not having the remorse, not having the wherewithal to say, I've done a horrific thing, please forgive me. So that, of course, from a pastoral perspective, is rather disappointing. But we come right back to the sovereignty of God once again. And obviously, God is working something, and we don't know exactly what, right, but eventually it shall be revealed. And as Pastor Mother Emanuel, it is the other aspect is, I believe that God has brought us through this season for a greater level, if you can think about that. What does that mean? Greater faith, greater trust, greater love, greater outreach,
Oh, yeah.
right? All of those aspects continue to give us the comfort that we know that God has never left us, nor will he forsake us. We shared this past week as well that weeping may endure for a night, but God's joy will come in the morning. And when he shows up, it is a phenomenal blessing.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, the shooter, you said this too, quote, "Even after going through everything and understanding the impact, I found myself feeling sorry for him," unquote. I'm curious, when did you start feeling sorry for him?
Well, again, you feel sorry from the particular perspective that he did not show any remorse, right? So when you begin to look at it from a biblical worldview, dealing with the whole aspect of sin and unrepentant sin, you of course feel sorry for a person who does not understand the heavier things in life. This world is not our home, Quintin. We're just travelers passing through, and at the end of the day, when God's final judgment is rendered, we have some who will be cast into the lake of fire, known as hell, and others who will, of course, enter into the presence of the Lord for eternity. So from that particular perspective, from a pastoral perspective, any unrepentant sin, I continue to grieve and continue to mourn. Now, my mourning for him individually, not necessarily, but it's all for those who do not understand the reality of eternity being in the balance. And I would have prayed by hearing all of the impact from the families, continued families showing him grace by saying, "We do forgive you." And as we are able to forgive, then that kind of releases our burden. We're no longer shackled by that spirit of hatred, that spirit of well, what's what I'm looking for? I guess realistically, yeah, I guess the spirit of hatred and the spirit of disappointment. But now we are able to say we are moving forward. We're growing stronger by the grace of God. So I think in the whole context of that question, that's kind of where I was.
Forgiveness and faith. As you know, many of the victims' family, as you know, on day one, right after he went to the bond court hearing, that Friday after the shooting, they forgave him. And obviously that tested their faith. As we sit here right now, Reverend Manning, how has this whole tragedy tested your faith?
Sure. Again, from testing of my faith,
Right.
as I shared with so many others privately, openly, I think, as well. Not necessarily knowing the playbook. No one has ever had to go through this before, and definitely no pastor has ever had to lead a congregation through this. So from strengthening my faith perspective, I am able to have a deeper trust in God. And you'll say, how can a pastor have a deeper trust? Everyone will be able to experience more of God's grace and more of God's mercy. And what that does is it resonates within their spirit. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, as far as the not necessarily picking up the pains of the families and carrying those struggles, but just being there with them, watching them, praying with them, and a lot of times the same struggle is there. You know, when you begin to think about it, right? Everyone is struggling with that whole aspect of forgiveness, faith, growth, and then the other point that I shared with you earlier, the sovereignty of God. Right? Surely we have to understand that within the sovereignty of God there is suffering, and as there is suffering, we are able to see God's grace. So that, of course, should bolster our faith and should bolster our trust. But at the same token, I understand, Quintin, that not everyone is in the same place. Right? There are some who are still struggling with it because they're not able to forgive, and I pray for them as well, because it is important. Because if you do not forgive, it's like a cancer; it can eat away at you. So we have to make sure that we're continuing to provide the same level of encouragement, the same level of prayer, the same level of counsel, the same level of just presence and being there. Just sending a text message saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you, praying for you." Those type of pastoral emphasis or pastoral care tenets help, in my opinion, help people get through these particular seasons when their faith may have taken a hit.
You talk about growing in a couple of answers earlier, and you also said this too, quote, I'll never use the word move on, but we were able to grow stronger.
Right.
After January 11th, what word can you describe besides growing and stronger?
After January 11th. Oh, after the end of the trial.
Right.
Yes. The whole aspect as far as growing stronger, I don't necessarily like I said, of course, moving forward, because moving forward kind of can create the impression that you're trying to close that door. You're closing it. That's it. I'm done. I'm moving on.
Right.
And I don't want people to ever think that as a pastor, Mother Emanuel that we ever will forget. I refer to the families, a lot of the survivors, or excuse me, yeah, I guess a lot of the survivors and a lot of the other family members, and I say lest I forget, because I never will forget your pain, I never will forget your struggle, I never forget what I walked with you through the past 60 days. But growing stronger is more or less a daily endeavor. Yesterday's strength, or today's strength, is built upon yesterday's strength.
Right.
And tomorrow's strength is going to be built upon today's strength. Each day I grow stronger. It's a daily walk. It's a daily process. And as we grow stronger, Quintin, then we're able to forgive. As we grow stronger, we're able to love. As we grow stronger, we're able to embrace one another. As we grow stronger, we're able to continue, as the psalmist said in Psalm 121, to look to the hills when we come with our help and our strength.
Right.
As we grow stronger, right? So it is a daily endeavor. It is a daily task. But at the same token, we must make sure that we are keeping that in the foremost parts of our mind, because as we are growing stronger, then I believe that we will continue to be that beacon of light in this dark world.
Yeah. I mentioned to you earlier, welcome to Charleston. Obviously, you came here in June 2016, and your first sermon was right around that time. And I know you told Channel 2 this right after your first sermon. You said this, quote, "Who am I to serve wonderful people? Who am I that someone would even think of calling my name and asking me to come and serve?" So here we sit, January 18, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
The world knows you as Reverend Eric Manning, the pastor of Mother Emanuel. What has it been like for you to come and serve this historic church?
Still humbling. Every day when I pull up and I park in my parking space,
Right.
Still humbled to be able to serve. It's one of those aspects, Quintin, when you begin to think about it, you should never become so prideful that you are not even good to be utilized by God. So you must continue to lean, in my opinion, I continue to lean and depend upon Him. Even with every decision that I have to make, I'm always praying, I'm always looking further down the road. How will this impact such and such? What will this mean to such and such? How will this help the families who had suffered the tragedy? How would this continue to make sure that they know that we care, that we're there for them? So every day is still a day of humility. And people may say, well, that's kind of strange. You should have been comfortable now with where you are. And I'm like, well, you should never really be comfortable. You can be okay. You can be assured that you're fine. And I'm not quaking in my loafers any longer, but I'm still understanding that that I have to continue to look to the Lord and depend upon Him for the wisdom that He is going to give me, the counsel that He's going to give me to help me lead this wonderful congregation. Even this past weekend, as we were celebrating MLK Day, on our worship guides, we had a picture of MLK sitting in this very seat where I sit in from every Sunday. So I, at the same token, understand the historical significance, which, of course, once again, is rather humbling. Who am I to be able to sit where he sat, to preach behind that same sacred pulpit where he preached from? So there's just so many other things that go along with it. So I always try to make sure that I keep the Lord very close, right in front, and do what He would have me to do. But at the end of the day, my prayer always is that I can stay humble.
Wow. Reverend Eric Manning, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Likewise.